Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Robots and Red Tape. As always, I am your host, Nick Schutt, and just out there and everybody listening, really appreciate you guys. Hope you guys had a great holiday season as well. And a happy New Year, and happy to welcome my friend Clint Alanis back on the podcast. Clint, how you doing, sir?
Great. I'm great. It's good to be on the other side of the holidays, or at least some of them. So looking forward to the next year.
Absolutely, man, 100%. And so, yeah, man, last time you came on was in April, and got to talk about your background and everything, and about Smack and the transition from military to the entrepreneurial life. Can you tell us a little bit about like the growth and evolution of Smack Technologies and just kind of everything that's been happening in your world in the last 9 months?
Man, it's been awesome. I feel like we've really hammered down in the last 8 to 9 months, to be honest. I mean, we are sprinting forward. And just in the last, I guess, in that period of time, we've got a couple new contracts under our belt with the government, which is amazing. We're feeling like we're outperforming a lot of kind of previous standards that have been set by other AI companies trying to work in the defense tech space, and so we feel really comfortable with kind of how that's evolving for us. We're just now starting to scale as far as hiring goes, and we spend a lot of time with the customers working on our core product suites and kind of the various applications under that to make sure that we're delivering exactly what the customer wants. So it's been really cool. I continue to learn an amazing amount. We have some brilliant engineers, just brilliant people across the team, and working with them on a day-to-day basis, working with the customers. I mean, there's no end to the amount of things that I need to learn. So it's pretty fun.
Awesome, man. Congratulations, dude. That's so exciting. It has to be super awesome to see all the traction you're getting as well and the wins and then, obviously having to scale up and grow and as you continue to build out all of your tools, man. That's super cool. So really
Yeah, well,
go
it's
ahead.
super rewarding too, right? I mean, the customers, it is a great thing to have been sitting on that side of it at one time and have been thinking, man, I really wish somebody would give me the things that I want. Uh, and sometimes asking for a football and somehow and like on the other end of that getting a hockey stick and you're like
Mhm.
what just happened. uh, to know that we have like such a close relationship with the customers that we can work with them on a day-to-day basis and make sure that if you ask for a football, we're going to give you a football. If you ask for a football bat, we're going to figure that out too. Like, just let us
Mhm.
know.
Yeah, man, absolutely. And so, for folks out there that don't know about, Smack and your guys' products at a high level, will you tell them everybody like what you're actually doing, the products you've launched over the last few months, and and how you're looking to really challenge a lot of the military planning, the standard or the let's say legacy system of how you go about planning an actual military operation.
Yeah, we have, I guess I would say that we have two core product suites, and that is Omega and Alpha. And I'll kind of dive into each of those here in a second. But we have Omega and Alpha, and then across both of those product suites, we have a series of applications. Those applications are basically aligned against warfighting functions in the traditional kind of Department of War methodology. These are the seven warfighting functions, and so we have applications that are like best optimized for each of those warfighting functions across those product suites. At a high level, Omega is intended to be utilized by any command where there's a staff. And so a large body of people that are specialists in their like specific realms. And then they have kind of different but interrelated workflows that all have to be woven together to ultimately get a big boss to get to a decision. Like, that's where Omega is intended to really augment that staff and that commander to understand what is the full scope of what's in the realm of the possible, what are the implications of the decisions I'm making, and how do I speed up this decision making process. Conversely, Alpha is intended to be pushed out to the tactical edge, and so Alpha lives on the edge. It is meant to be, the Department of War's equivalent to Copilot. It's gonna reside with you. It's gonna help you with those local decisions that are relevant for your space on the battlefield. you know they're contextualized to the campaign, and so it's not ignorant to what's going on at a higher level. In fact, it's informed by that, but it is making sure that the things that you are doing at the tactical edge are relevant in the time and the space that those decisions are being made. So, Alpha is not really intended to be like, hey, should I go left or right at the intersection? Like, that's not what Alpha is doing. What Alpha is doing is saying, you have a limited number of assets here at the edge, whether they're autonomous or manned. We can get into that. The best use of those assets based off of what the campaign's asking you to do is to do this with them.
Hmm.
And so then the user gets to like interface with it and understand, okay, how am I going to accomplish this, et cetera. So really, really exciting to see how that's built out over time.
Yeah, man, that is super exciting. So really helping, helping folks on the tactical edge best utilize their resources in the spot in the part pieces of the battle space that they are engaged, that they're, responsible for, right? While at the same time, keeping in mind the overall like commander's intent and doctrine about what's supposed to be going on.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, we've talked in the past about like the way that the military used to talk about this was mission command, and that the
Hmm.
commander would give his intent. You'd get a mission statement, you'd get intent, and you'd get kind of a loose kind of left and right of the lane that you're supposed to stay in, and then like go forth and do good things, right?
Hmm.
And that was one. It was appropriate and it was wildly useful. I think in the from World War II through Vietnam, I think that was an application where it made a lot of sense. We saw a deviation from that during the counterterrorism years. I think we saw, you would still get the mission, you would still get commander's intent, but now you basically had a commander like looking over your shoulder, via ISR on operations, and then like telling you, hey, you should go left or right at the intersection, and you're a high level commanding officer. Like, why are you even watching this right now? Like, while I'm trying to be on the X.
Hmm.
Um, and so like we saw that kind of de-evolution of how commanding, like how large scale command and control was enacted. And so now we're seeing, I think, an understanding or a realization that if we find ourselves in World War III, God forbid, you're going to have to get back to that level of autonomy where you're going to tell people, this is what I need you to do. And because the fact that they're going into, disconnected and degraded and denied environments, you may not hear from them for a week, and you just have to hope that they're going to do what's right. But doing what's right is so fluid. I think we're projecting forward into World War III, and you look ahead and you say, doing what was right in World War II was extremely complicated and hard, but it was manageable and it was understandable because the speed of everything was at a rate that a human can consume data, make a decision, and then like kind of execute.
Hmm.
I think what we're projecting moving forward is that that's not going to be the case. The amount of data coming at us, the speed in which that data is coming at us, and the criticality of the decisions being made because of the resource constrained environment that we envision we will fight World War III in. You cannot afford to have those poor decisions at the edge or a lack of clarity on what's the most important target right now, because
Hmm.
the most important target right now may change on a 6 hour basis. and,
Right.
and and like, how do you keep up with that if you're not even able to talk to the boss 1,000 miles away? And so that's what we are envisioning, and like how we're trying to posture ourselves to support that warfighter at the edge.
Yeah, man. No, that's fantastic. And from a legacy perspective, right? Obviously, it changes, but how are military operations like planned now?
Yeah, it's tough. I think there's two parts to that, and if you talk to the practitioners, you would talk in terms of plans. Plans is we're going to put together as solid of a plan as we can based off a bunch of assumptions, based off of as much clarity as we can get, and we're going to try to accommodate every eventuality through these plans. And those plans are continuous. They're always making new plans. Like the plan never sits on the shelf, like how you hear people talk about. It's always being updated. It's always being refreshed. To supplement that, you have, okay, like now we know what the plan is, but we also know that that plan accommodating all eventualities is not going to survive first contact. And
Hmm.
so then there's a decision making cycle that has to happen inside of a command or inside of a staff that gets the boss to the point where he or she feels comfortable that they have enough data,
Hmm.
that they have enough relevant data, and that they understand the implications of like what they're looking at. What happens if I bomb that? What happens if I don't bomb that? What happens if I use this asset instead of that asset? Like all of those implications. And so those things right now today are meant to be complementary, but they're also, if I'm just being honest, they're extremely analog. they
Hmm.
are they are people intensive. They are frankly disruptible at multiple levels because
Hmm.
they rely on meetings to prepare for meetings to then prepare for the next meeting, and you want your subject matter experts at every one of those, but they're never available because they have competing interests across everything from taking drug tests to like going and get doing their physical fitness test for the year or whatever. They have all of these competing interests, and so you never really have the optimal kind of people involved. So you have more meetings to get it all right. And by the time you cycle through the meeting to prepare for the meeting to brief the person who's going to brief the next guy at the next meeting, you get to the point of like you're a week and a half into this process and you still haven't got the decision in front of the boss yet. And
Hmm.
so, I think it's hard to really capture that if you're living it in a day-to-day basis, because each of those staff members today is wildly busy.
Hmm.
They go from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting, and they have very little time to think about the problems that they're facing, to like kind of reflect on what are we looking at operationally, strategically, et cetera. And the downtime that they do have in between meetings is filled with emails, right?
Hmm.
And so like they have this feeling of exhaustion because they're overwhelmed on a day-to-day basis doing the battle rhythm, which is what it's called. And what you if you peel back from it though, if you pull back from it and you look at it, you realize, hey, we're not actually, like, we're stirring bathwater. We're not actually making progress. We're not rowing forward. We're just
Hmm.
moving in a circle because the decisions aren't being made fast enough to make them relevant. By the time that we make the decision, the window of opportunity has closed, and
Hmm.
now we're trying to reevaluate on what the next decision should be. So it's a very cyclical process, but it is today's process is wrought with peril. I mean, it's
Hmm.
just the RB Dragons. Like, it's all bad. It's not a good way to go into the next war by any means.
Okay. No, absolutely, man. And I mean, I know you guys talk a lot about decision dominance, at Smack, and what do you mean, and how do you plan to disrupt this cycle that is just, frankly, it takes too long. And I think that, like, when we're, the length of time is not ideal when you're dealing with, like, let's just say terrorist groups, or armed militias or things like that. But when you're talking about like peer level adversaries, whether it's China or China, or Russia or somebody along those lines, right? How does and I think that the requirement for speed becomes so much more important when you're dealing with somebody that can like hang at your level. So how do you try to disrupt all that?
Yeah, what I mean, I guess what is the saying? Like the first step in making progress is identifying that you have a problem. Like,
Hmm.
I think the good news for us is that the Department of War has recently been very aggressive in saying, "Hey, we have a problem. Like, there is a problem here. This is not sustainable." And I think that as soon as they acknowledged the problem, it made it viable for people to come in and offer disrupting or disruptive technologies to try to address the deficiency. Right now, I will say, and just because I think it's important, there are a lot of people, and I won't say that they're selling snake oil because it's not necessarily snake oil.
Hmm.
What There are a lot of people attempting to answer this problem, on behalf of the department, and so it is exciting to see the number of very brilliant people trying to come together with different solutions and different ways of putting solutions together to offer this, or to offer the solution.
Hmm.
I think that uniquely for us, we find ourselves in a position where, one, we have this domain expertise that across our company, where we have lived in that world, right? Like, we haven't lived in World War III because nobody has, but we've lived at the edge, we've lived on the X, we've lived in the staff meetings, we've lived in the decision making cycles. Like, we've been a part of that, and having that resident kind of domain expertise inside the company is unique. And I think
Yep.
it's unique and extremely beneficial to us as we try to like address the department's deficiencies. In addition to that, the fact that we're attacking this through a fairly unique way, in so much as we are applying RL to solving this. And so, what does that mean? It means that essentially we are the only frontier AI company that is specifically servicing national security requirements. There,
Hmm.
there are a number of frontier companies that are, maybe they started with LLMs, they're increasingly moving into computer vision and other types of models in order to kind of really advance what they're doing. But those are all general application frontier AI companies, right? It's meant to be everything from how do I book my tickets on United to how
Hmm.
do I drive from here to Alabama to, what is the best way to go to war. Like, I mean,
Hmm.
it's intended, like, they envision it as this like one size fits all application, and we're coming at it and saying, like, we don't believe that that's possible. We don't
Hmm.
believe that it's the best use of resources. We don't believe that it's possible, and so we're going to do it through our domain expertise, combined with the deep RL, the models that we are building in order to accommodate this, we're offering something unique with that decision dominance.
Hmm.
Now, that decision dominance, as we like come into the space and we talk with the customers and we ask, what are you looking for? They acknowledge they have a problem. They acknowledge that their cycles today, the kill chain, um, is fragile and that's not a good place to live. None of them are excited about that. And so then we get into the weeds with the customers, and it's like, where are your pain points? The military doesn't always talk in terms of pain points, but like, where's the problems? Who's the problem? Like, let's point them out. Let's talk about exactly what it is. And when they do that, and we're able to show, hey, look, we're not coming in here and saying, give me a bunch of money and I'm going to give you the best thing ever. We're going to come in with a prototype and we're going to show you the prototype and say, hey, this is what we've already done. Like, this is what we have today. This is not meant for your use case. This is meant for like an example of what the system is capable of doing in a generic application, or maybe in a specific application, but not necessarily refined to that customer's use case. This is what's possible. Does this interest you? And if it interests you, what would you like to see different about what we're doing? Would you want more maritime environment? Would you want more aerial environment? Would you want more defenders having a stronger A2AD system or a weaker A2? So we can structure it specifically to what they want. And I think that that's kind of the third thing that makes Smack so unique is that we're that defense tech startup that is willing to pivot at the drop of a hat. If the customer says, I want it in blue and walking backwards, like we'll figure it out. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like that, like just tell us exactly what you're looking for and we're going to get there. And so I think the domain expertise, the model in which we're employing and the unique technologies that we're applying against the problem, plus the fact that we are extremely adaptive to what the customer requires, makes it much easier for us to move into this space, disrupt kind of what is the status quo, and not have people feel like we're doing it for the bottom line or
Right.
feel like we're trying to come after people's jobs or any of that type of stuff. Like we are generally well received, and the fact that we come in and say, hey, this, let us prove it. If
Hmm.
we prove it and you like it, like, let's go. If you
Yeah.
don't like it, no big deal. Like, keep
Hmm.
doing what you're doing. And I think that that's a refreshing way to approach it.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I really like the point you made around your domain expertise specifically. I think that the generalized AI companies, the larger ones or even the mid-sized ones that have been doing a lot of different things and have applications across a lot of different areas, I think they can absolutely solve a lot of problems, or approach and try to address a lot of problems. But I also think that they should be, let's just say, working on lower stakes problems because I think if and like you said, God forbid we get into another like full scale open conflict, whether it's a World War III or just another one with a large with a peer enemy. Um, you know, the margin for error is so small, right? And yeah, personally, I'd feel much more comfortable with people like who are building a system to address problems that they themselves sat in specifically to fix those issues, when you start talking about military planning, and military operations, right?
I mean, 100%. The shared misery is a great way to build camaraderie, a great way to build morale and like closeness. And the fact that we've lived in those worlds and like, hey man, I've done the skull dragging of going from battle rhythm event to battle rhythm event and having the meetings and not having and like just taking frantic notes and not even knowing what meeting I'm in or why I got there. Like
Hmm.
that is the world that I have lived. And as you know, right, like we've lived on the X also with that,
Hmm.
two radios, one in each ear, two different people that I'm talking to, both asking me questions, both need immediate answers. Those helmet fires from back then. My fear is that is a what we considered to be a helmet fire during the middle of like counterterrorism days on an X trying to deconflict problems like locally, is going to look laughably simple to the people that find themselves in that next large scale conflict or that next high intensity conflict where that helmet fire is going to be wildly overwhelming. And so I think that just the fact that we've had exposure to it
Hmm.
and that we can come in and we kind of laugh about a lot of times. I don't really actively try to have meetings with super senior individuals on the military side. Like, I mean, I'm always interested in what the general or the admiral has to say, and obviously, like, I want to make sure that we're addressing their requirements as well.
Hmm.
But I really, really want to know what that staff person's life is like. Like, I want to know what that E5 to E8 enlisted person's life is like on a day-to-day basis. How's that O3 to O5 living and slugging it out, both at the edge and on the staff, and
Hmm.
talking through like, how can I make your life better, man? Like that's what I want to focus on. And so it's exciting because I think a lot of times those people are overlooked, right? Like the big companies that have founder teams that aren't coming from this world, or just have evolved. They were founded in World War I or World War II, and now they're a behemoth in the space. And they're now led by essentially like a managerial class of people, like not because they're bad people, they're majorly talented and
Hmm.
intelligent. But those guys aren't trying to bust in and get like at that low level conversation, be like, dude, tell me what hurts. Tell me
Hmm.
why it hurts. Let's figure this out. Those guys are hiring former admirals and former generals, and they're going to like tea parties like on the back end. It's like that's amazing. It is a business strategy. It is not the place that we focus, because at the end of the day, like I'm more worried about making sure the warfighters are prepared.
Right. You want to talk to the people that are actually doing the work and have the pain. Oh,
Yeah, I mean, I
right.
and to be fair, like there's going to be some admirals and general officers that are going to have a lot of stress and a lot of pain and a lot of like really hard decisions to be making. We want to help them out too.
Hmm.
But I think our opinion is we're going to help them out by making sure the staff is better, and that we're going
Yep.
to get the right information to that decision maker far faster and more accurately than they would have otherwise.
Hmm.
So we don't want to neglect those guys. I'm just saying I want to approach it from, let me make sure that the staff, that the people doing the hard heavy lifting on a day-to-day basis, that they are
Hmm.
best augmented and supported, and then
Yeah.
the rest of it kind of takes care of itself. Like
Hmm.
that's the beauty of it.
Absolutely. No, and it's a top down and a bottom up approach, right? It has to be, I
That's
think.
right.
Because I
That's
think
right.
that's I think that to your point, I think one of and I've heard this from, folks that are in government, and in the military, that and especially in the military, that they'll have to try to figure out how to make a tool work to solve a problem, because they weren't like nobody actually talked to them to understand what their real problems were. And it was a very top-down solution, right? And while, listen, the top is absolutely important. You need to understand like what information needs to flow up to these commanders to make decisions, right? If you're not engaging the people that are actually doing the work to gather and like curate that information and give it to the commander so that they have the right data, yeah, you're just going to be I don't like you're not going to be solving the right problem, frankly.
Yeah, and I mean, I think and I've sat in on meetings like with multiple industry partners in the room and having conversations with various end users, and like I think one of the key differentiating factors that I've noticed at least is when I listen to other industry people, leaders, whatever, talk to customers or potential customers, they ask questions like what's hard, what's not, but most of their questions are designed like with a they already have a solution in mind, and so they're asking leading questions almost to get to the solution. Well, what if I gave you this thing? Well, what if I gave you that thing? And it's like, hey, I mean, that's kind of a car salesman type of an approach, right? Like they already have the car they want to sell you, they just want to get you to say yes, and like that's awesome. We sit in those same meetings, and like the conversation is like, what's your day like, man?
Mhm.
Like tell me what is your 12-hour workday or your 14-hour workday or your whatever workday, like what does that look like for you? Oh
Mhm.
damn, like that sounds really awful. Like how do you manage, how do you get food when you're in this environment? Like how do you sleep when y'all are in an exercise and it's like 24/7 operations and you're the only person that has the expertise to answer this problem? Like how does that work? And so like I'm not leading them to a solution and saying like, well, what if I gave you like a little bit more of this?
Mhm.
It's like, well, just tell me about your life, tell me what sucks.
Yeah, man.
Oh, okay, well, wow, like maybe I can help with that. Let me go think now, how
Mhm.
can we help you with that problem? And like that's it's just a different approach. It's a different mentality on how do you treat the warfighter. Are they are they a customer that you're trying to wedge into the car that you've already got on the market to sell them, or are you asking them in a way that you can build the car specifically to what they're trying to get done? And like we're definitely the latter of
Yeah.
that.
Absolutely, man. No, 100%. So no, we've talked about how like operations are planned now, right? And the cycle, but using like Alpha and Omega, how does that change for commanders? Whether it's at a strategic, strategic planning or like a tactical plan, but also more importantly, how does it empower commanders to adapt in real time?
Yeah, I mean the best thing, or I say one of the best things of what we offer, in my opinion, is the fact that a commander has the ability. to understand the implications of the decisions that they're looking at.
Mm-hmm.
And generally speaking, the way the system is designed is that we surface courses of action for the boss. The boss says, this is what I want to have happen. This is how I want to have it. These are the assets that I have at my disposal. The staff gets involved. They mess with that. They tweak it. They work it through the workflows. Like, it's a very collaborative across different domains. And at the end of that, but again, comparing like weeks to minutes, right? Like, I mean, that is the timeline compression that we're talking about. But in those minutes, then you get to the commander, and what he sees, or what he or she sees when they look at those courses of action, is, if I do course of action one, the implications to me and my force are this. I'm
Mm-hmm.
gonna, and it could be good or bad. Hey boss, if you pick one, COA A, like, you're gonna run out of gas in 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
Like, well, that's not a great option. But maybe it's worth the risk. Like, what does that look like, right? And like, here's COA 2. COA 2 is, you're going to have more gas, but you're going to run out of bombs.
Mm-hmm.
Also, not all. So you can have this ability to forecast
Mm-hmm.
and say, about the decisions that I'm making, am I addressing a risk, or am I seizing an opportunity? And like, that's an important distinction in and of itself. When that distinction's made, what are the pros and cons of each of those? And then, like, what do I think is going to happen, right? And like, that is a very unique thing that we offer. So on top of time compression, on top of alleviating people hours, and saying like, hey, this collaborative thing can happen electronically. You don't all have to like gather up in the same room, or have multiple VTCs, video teleconferences, with people coming in from all over the world to like collaborate. Nope, we can do it like grown-ups. We don't even need PowerPoint. Like, let's do it like this. You can make these things happen. You can be far more efficient as a staff and more resilient as a staff. But
Mm-hmm.
then ultimately, when that decision maker gets to making the decision, what are the implications of this? Like,
Mm-hmm.
how am I best utilizing the resources that I have, and what's going to happen based off of the decision? And then you just live that cycle,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that cycle spins
Mm-hmm.
so much faster than how it does today. I mean, we don't even have the way that most things happen today. We don't even have a really solid assessment mechanism in place for like the decisions that we're making. So we don't even know, today, when when a high level commander makes the decisions, like, did we do what we thought we were going to do? And it's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's a horrible place to live in, right? So we have the assessment built into it. And so it's just as it is such a better process writ large when you're living in that world, that I think that I don't even know how you would live without it. Now, that's mainly Omega.
Mm-hmm.
Alpha, and I just want to touch on it briefly, or we can go into it more, whichever you'd like. But
Mm-hmm.
the cool thing about what Alpha offers in the long term is that increasingly, I think, as the department moves away from to maybe the traditional manned conflict, into we're moving into autonomous kind of engagements, or autonomous utilization inside of engagements. I think the way that we talk about that is like, hey, we need intelligent autonomy. Like,
Mm-hmm.
there is a difference, a key distinction between autonomous systems and intelligent autonomous systems. And I'm not saying that the things that are out there today aren't wildly like technologically advanced. They're very good at what they do. They can fly, they can dip, they can dive, they can duck, all those things like dodgeball.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is like, they're not coordinated in a larger sense.
Mm-hmm.
There's not an intelligent autonomy that is saying, not only the target has changed in the last couple of minutes, but the best way to sense and affect the target has changed. The best leveraging of assets available has changed. And so we think that Alpha gets you to the point where you can have autonomy, intelligent autonomy at the edge, and that allows you to then realize the force efficiencies and the economy of force that ultimately I think the department is striving for. And just to give a little bit of a converse look at it, when you think about how Ukraine is being fought right now, like, the big thing with Ukraine is that there's autonomy being employed, but it's not true autonomy. It's FPV autonomy for the most part,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so what they're running now is they're essentially running fiber and Ethernet
Yep.
all over the front line, the FLOT, to enable these, quote unquote, autonomous systems to go forward. And what those really are is, they're not autonomous, they're just unmanned. And
Mm-hmm.
that's okay. Like, that's great. Like, there are people savings in that, and that's an important step. But I think where people envision it going is that if I'm at the tactical edge and I have alpha, I'm going to say my mission in this campaign is to reduce, the A2 AD threat in this area. And alpha is going to tell me the best use of your autonomous sensors, your autonomous effectors, your little robot dogs carrying all your batteries and food is this. You hit execute and they all start operating while I'm handling like the things that I need to be doing locally, right?
Yeah. No, and so on the Omega side, one of the things that you mentioned terrifies me around us not actually having the ability to understand the implications of our actions at scale right now, is like that's something that you'd think would have already been addressed. But and the fully autonomous systems versus the intelligent autonomous system is fascinating because you're absolutely right that like just because you can have, say, a drone flying around by itself, right, and be unmanned, that doesn't mean that you are coordinating your efforts across the entire battle space, right? And having an understanding of not just how things are changing in real time, because I think that, as we move towards autonomous warfare and I think you're absolutely right that the speed is going to increase and going to continue to increase.
Yeah.
And how do you make sure that you're not overusing assets to decreasing and then increasing like logistics demands on the organization overall. And yeah, so I mean I think that's absolutely awesome that you can at the edge have a true intelligent view across everything, and have it updated in real time. Super cool.
Well, and I think that if you don't, you run the risk of getting drugged back into a different type of attrition warfare, right? I mean,
Hmm.
if we don't do it that way, if we don't optimize the assets that we have, autonomous as well as manned and et cetera, um, you're just entering into a different type of war of attrition where we have to then create a defense industrial base that can keep up
Hmm.
with our adversaries globally, and not just one adversary, because that's not the nature more than likely of the next high intensity conflict, but multiple adversaries at once. And so like we have to outproduce them in drones, we have to outproduce them in autonomous subsurface vehicles and surface vehicles. And it's like what are we doing? Like
Hmm.
we should never. I think we're past the point of trying to fight an attrition war, or at least I
Hopefully.
think that the country doesn't want to do it, right?
Yeah.
And so like if they don't want to do it, it's going to make it real hard to do it.
Hmm.
So you have to have this intelligent autonomy, or else
Yeah.
it's just not another option.
Mhm. And how do you guys operate at the edge when there's like low bandwidth or no bandwidth?
Yeah, it's wickedly hard, right? And
Mhm.
and the way that we kind of talk about, we build fault tolerant systems. And so what does that mean, right? If I download chat gpt on my iPhone today, I can take it anywhere with me as long as I got 5G
Mhm.
or LTE or whatever, right? And I if I have some kind of connectivity, chat gpt works real good. as
Mhm.
soon as i as soon as I hit a spot where I don't have connection for one reason or another, it doesn't like it doesn't give me some answers. It gives me zero answers. It says
Mhm.
disconnected, cannot help you. Like,
Mhm.
find another person to ask.
Yeah.
Um,
And to
and
to
so
that point, if you're like on your Wi-Fi and you drop from, well, you say you're, yeah, and I've done this. Like I'm in the middle of talking to it and I drop from my Wi-Fi to the cell sit, to cell, any connection interruption and it's just done.
that's right.
Hmm.
And so you can't have that, right? I mean, if we know that we're going to go into a high intensity conflict where you're going to be living in a space where you may or may not have connections, like at any given point, you have to have what we would call, like I said, like default autonomy, which is basically a graceful degradation of the model. And
Hmm.
so it means it starts like as when it's connected, it has the full breadth of its resources and its understanding. And I'm not talking LLM, I'm talking kind of model holistic. It
Hmm.
has it has a wide breadth understanding of things across the model. When it becomes disconnected, it doesn't go dumb right off the bat or drop to like can't help you. It slowly becomes less relevant. That model slowly becomes less relevant to the campaign because it's the time space in between when it was last updated means that the relevancy of its recommendations are no less maybe valid, but they're not as informed as they could be, and so it kind of gracefully degrades.
Hmm.
Now, that's assuming that we get completely disconnected, which is an assumption that we've tried to kind of move away from. We think, and I won't go way into it, we think that there are ways to maintain awareness via one way connections
Mm-hmm.
that would allow for, in military terms, low probability of intercept, low probability of detect, um, and receive enough information to
Mm-hmm.
make sure that the model stays within probably a band of relevancy of cognition, like cognition is probably not the right word, of
Mm-hmm.
efficacy over a period of time. And so you may never be batting at 100, but you're never dropping below 90 either. And so you kind
Mm-hmm.
of have a much tighter wave. And like that's it's, I don't know if it's good enough, but we're trying to get it to the point where people are comfortable with that level of kind of fluctuation
Mm-hmm.
in real time.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I think it's also probably going to continue to evolve as you look at things like, like low Earth orbit, low Earth orbit, internet connections, things like that as well. Yeah, I think it'll obviously continue to evolve. But I'm with you that if that's actually a really awesome solution to it, where you're essentially like just slowing everything down a little bit. And I assume that like also gets pulled up in front of the commanders so they know and they understand. And yeah, so that's
And
super.
and I think I also should say the cool thing about alpha, the way that we're constructing alpha, is that local intelligence that you're collecting is still real time, right?
Hmm.
And so like your local sensors feeding into to your alpha are going to make sure that I, as the end user, have the most up to date situational awareness for my immediate vicinity. And maybe it's even plugging me into my partner or ally that I'm working with. And so this is a kind of a cross function with across the coalition to make
Hmm.
sure that like that understanding locally is maximized. It's just a matter of maybe I don't have the full context from the campaign,
Hmm.
on high. And so and we've also talked about, I'm not saying that we're going to go to war on an island in the Pacific, but let's say, that is let's say that that's the example for this use case. I think that it is valid that we could park an omega on that island as like the big brain, and
Hmm.
then have the alphas as like spokes around that hub. And now you could almost have a contiguous kind of mm, awareness in this local area, this local island area, which may be hundreds of miles large. Um, and like, so that awareness is as solid as it can be. And your recommendation engine relative to that awareness is perfect or as good as it can be. And then it's making the omega in that instance would be the thing that's responsible for doing the up and out communication episodically, while
Hmm.
kind of keeping everybody else collectively working together. So I think there's some really really cool applications to this, depending on what the environment is that we're talking about, what the adversary looks like, et cetera. But we're really excited on what that could what that could look like.
Yeah, man, no, that's super cool. And building the brain for the kill chain requires like some incredibly complex technologies. And I know you guys talk about processing multimodal data in real time, and you've written about synthetic warfare generation. Can you break these technologies down for us a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Let's talk about the synthetic warfare generation first, maybe, because that's an interesting part of it. And I think that a lot of times, people have a little bit of a hang up on, how accurate can synthetic data be? And
Hmm.
I think the thing that we would say is like we haven't fought World War III yet, so nobody has data for World War III. And if they tell you that they do, like they're incorrect in whatever it is that they're saying. So without data for World War III, you're left with the options of inferring lessons learned from other conflicts. And so
Hmm.
looking at, I mean, maybe World War II, looking at Korea, looking at Vietnam, looking at counterterrorism days, um, looking to like kind of major battles. So like looking at Fallujah or looking at Ramadi or looking at Marja and trying to like draw comparisons that have application like on a larger scale, or maybe Ukraine, right? Like as
Hmm.
a more kind of a contemporary example. So you're either trying to infer lessons learned from those kind of events, historical events, and pulling them forward and projecting them into World War III, or you have to create synthetic data. And
Hmm.
just by the fact that we are creating synthetic data probably tells you the way that we lean on this is that those lessons learned, not only might they be inaccurate,
Hmm.
they may be dangerous to assume that that's what World War III looks like.
I completely agree. I
And
completely.
so and so we create this synthetic environment, and it's all physics based. So we're not making stuff up, right? Like this isn't like moon rocks and space lasers. Like this is real. It's based in physics, both from a from an object standpoint. And so an object relative to the world state, how does
Mhm.
a ship perform at sea? How does a plane function at different altitudes? Like all of these things that are very physics based for objects, but also the way that like sensors perform in an
Mhm.
environment. So what is, how does EOIR work in this space? What if it's foggy? What does SAR do? What does LiDAR offer you? What does ELINT offer you? Like all of these different factors. And those are all physics based kind of extrapolations to say, this is the holistic synthetic world state that we've created. And we can fight World War III repetitively inside of this world state. And what we've essentially created with the RL engine is the ability to put agents all over this world state watching World War III be fought out and
Mhm.
watching it from different angles,
Mhm.
watching it from different perspectives, watching it from the rifleman at the tactical edge all the way up to the commander at the highest level, watching
Mhm.
it from the red side, watching it from the blue side, like taking all of this data. And so what the synthetic environment allows you to do is pull so much more data
Mhm.
out of it, right?
Yeah.
And more relevant data
Mhm.
is what we would argue, right? And then you basically pull that forward into like, okay, now what? So in real
Mhm.
time, what we have is we have a sensor. uh Sensor fusion is probably an overplayed term. We have the ability to take all of that multimodal data that you talked about, including sensor data,
Mhm.
raw or processed, which is unique, I think, and at the edge process that information. And so the intelligence community or the military practitioners would talk in terms of PED, right? Processing, evaluation, and distribution of
Mhm.
intelligence. And so basically it's like I get the sensor data, someone has to evaluate it. As they look at it, they process it, they evaluate it, and then they send it out to people that they think they need it. Well,
Mhm.
we try to eliminate or very much compress that ped cycle, and we do it on the premises, like with the system.
Mhm.
So we take all this multimodal data to include sensor data, we process it, we make a determination on what does the world state look like right now, plus the
Mhm.
operational kind of campaign context that we talked about, and then the RL engine provides decisions, and
Mhm.
it's based off of all of this. Here's the best use of your assets. Here's the best use like to accomplish the mission that you've described. Here's what we expect Red to do next based off of all of this content. So I mean, it's just
Mhm.
this interplay between these two systems that ultimately is underpinned by this synthetic world,
Mhm.
uh, synthetic physics based world model or world state that feeds this thing, and it's just an exciting way to address it. And so I'm talking kind of high level, but that is the technology
Yeah.
in a nutshell, and kind of like what we're trying to do here.
That's all. That's fantastic, man. Because I like so I it's super super cool, and I completely agree with you around not being able to or how dangerous it can be to try to use other conflicts, right, over the like the last 100 years to predict the next conflict, right? And
Yeah.
one that I always think about is you think about like the end of the Napoleonic Wars, right, with the Battle of Waterloo, right? That was like a 2-day battle, I think. Horrible battle. I think about 50,000 people were killed, were casualties overall, right?
Yep.
Between all the sides. In the first month of World War I, over 600,000 people were casualties, right?
Yeah.
And like I know that like on one of the early days in yeah, I want to say the Battle of the Frontiers or what have you, the French led 27,000 people killed in one day, right? And you just you cannot use, especially over such a big time scale, right? Because, like, let's be clear, it's been 80 years this year since World War II ended, and over such a large time scale where there just hasn't been such a high intensity conflict, that data is now useless, right? You look at World War I to World War II with a 20-year gap, right, or a 19-year gap, like that is more useful, right? But now like when you start talking 80 years, 100 years, just a century between, hopefully between large conflicts, like
Yeah.
that data is just, I mean, it's just history at that point, right?
Yeah, I mean, it tells. I mean, there's like we talk about it. So I fought in Fallujah, right, in the Battle of
Hmm.
Fallujah, Second Battle of Fallujah. So that was what November of 2004.
Hmm.
So we're like what 21 years after the Battle of Fallujah, which is not ancient history and
Hmm.
was arguably high intensity. But there's no, I mean, there's very little lessons learned that I would pull out of that to talk about like how would we, defend Taipei, or
Mm-hmm.
how would we attack Kaliningrad? Like
Mm-hmm.
these are it's just such a like what are we talking about? Like
Right.
we're it's apples and dump trucks, right? So it's
Mm-hmm.
like how do you pull a comparison out of that? And even having lived it, other than maybe you could talk about like the value of morale, you can talk about people's willingness to face risk. Like you
Mm-hmm.
can certainly contextualize and maybe even draw some hard kind of metrics out of the morale of an organization and like what does that mean for its fighting prowess and so on.
Mm-hmm.
But like those minor lessons are not something that you can draw like a large understanding of how do we think we're going to fight World War III out of. Even Ukraine, like I said, even Ukraine with the most recent high intensity kind of environment that we've heard of, like that has little to no bearing on what a war in the Pacific would look like if that's where we found ourselves in the next war. Like it just doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
And to tell ourselves that it does is lying. And
Mm-hmm.
so like, okay, so how do we have to do this in a new way. And that's what we're doing.
No, dude, that's awesome, man. And how do you guys address interoperability between like coalition or allied forces and network?
So yeah, dude, it's hard, right? Because like I mean the biggest limiting factor in that is policy. It's not necessarily anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Um we are, what's interesting about kind of how SMAC has approached this, and again, because I think because we have the domain expertise and because we understand the problem, like we started this whole thing saying we're going to build a joint tool.
Mm-hmm.
Like now you can't sell a joint tool to the Department of War because there is nobody that buys with joint money, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like they don't, the acquisitions is service based. And so
Yep.
like maybe DIU nowadays, but primarily it's all service based. And so we build a joint tool, but we sell it to different services because that's how we have to do business.
Mm-hmm.
We envision the same when we talk about the coalition. And so when we talk to allies or partners around the world and we talk about, hey, what would Omega look like for you? The vision that we have is like, hey, we from the very beginning, we built a combined joint tool that is meant to bridge these gaps. The fact that there are policy limitations in peacetime that like make that problematic,
Mm-hmm.
it is what it is, man. Like as a business person, like I can't do anything about that. But what I can do is I can make sure that we have the best possible product out there for the warfighter on the allied side or on the coalition side, across the joint force, et cetera. And the day that we find ourselves in that high intensity conflict and policy says, you know what, we should probably just give them the information faster so that we can win this war. Like the system will already be in place and it's a flip of a switch to make it happen at that point, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to, reworking an entire apparatus around like, okay, well, now the policy says we can share it. Like, let's figure out how to share it.
Right.
It's already there. It's already embedded. It's just ready to flip whenever they say, hey, like, let's go.
Yeah, dude, that's awesome because especially when you start looking at, yeah, these larger conflicts, right? Like World War II is a great example. World War I, World War II, where, intelligence sharing becomes a lot more desirable when there are lives on the line as opposed to, national pride, I think.
Dude, I mean, you can't, the funny thing is, depending on where you talk about us finding ourselves in the next war,
Hmm.
you know, two-thirds of the bullets, two-thirds of the resources, like assets, like sensors, wherever we find ourselves fighting, are not going to be American. Like they're going to
Hmm.
be an allies of some form or fashion, whether it's in the Pacific, Europe, or the Middle East. Like, I mean, not for nothing. Like, unless we find ourselves at war in the Western Hemisphere, like it's going to be very like we're going to have to work within a coalition. So to try to do it any other way, like here we're just going to brute strength and ignorance our way through this next conflict, like that's ignorant. We shouldn't
Hmm.
do that. That's not an approach that we should embrace by any means.
That's how you lose a conflict, right?
But that's how it takes you 6 months to like unask yourself so that you can like maybe win. But
Yeah.
like what happens in that first 6 months? Like what are you
Hmm.
trying to recover at that point to reestablish the status quo because you just realized like, oh man, we should probably do that
Hmm.
intel sharing that you're talking
Right.
about, or we should coordinate strikes together in a way that's more efficient than a sticky note with a 10-digit grid on it. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like this has got to be better.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. And how do you validate how do you how do you validate, these products, when they are intended for peer level conflict, but can't, but you can't test them.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Validation is an interesting thing. Validation of models inside the department is interesting. Like there is a process for it. It is, as you would imagine, fairly archaic, and certainly not intended for doing model validation of AI or ML.
Mhm.
So we're supporting that effort as best we can and making sure that we're as compliant as we can be across the board. I would say that you can test segments of
Hmm.
what we're doing, right? And so when we bring in subject matter experts, or when we're working with the customer who is a subject matter expert, we expose them to a part of the system and say, this is what the system is outputting. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
Like, if it says that this is the best utilizations of the assets, take this. This gave it to us in, approximately 10 seconds. Can you go and do the math on it? Let us know. Does that match how you would do it?
Hmm.
Take as much time as you need. If you come back 3 days later and you're like, yeah, it's good, or it's not exactly how I would do it, but it's 90%. Like those are all valid like points that we can then ingest into the system.
Hmm.
The other thing that we're increasingly finding is that people want us to assist them on wargaming. And
Hmm.
wargaming is a super interesting world for us, not because we necessarily want to get into the wargaming business, because it's not really a lucrative place to be in defense.
Hmm.
Um, but what it does allow, especially when we focus on supporting wargaming on like attrition or
Hmm.
on resource utilization versus how the staff planned it versus how the system planned it, like those are super important touch points for us to pull back into the system to help us understand, are we moving in the right direction on this, are we off base altogether, if this if this event happened and our attrition engine said that this is what the attrition would be, is it believable? Like, did we totally like magic dust this thing? Like, how do we get to where we need to be on it? So wargaming is a place that we are, it wasn't where we started. But when a customer says like, hey, could you help us with doing wargaming? It's an interesting thing that we think we can do. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man, 100%. And man, as a as a former commander, yeah, how do you train? Yeah, how do you shoot the gap, man? Frankly, how do you train warfighters to trust AI without becoming overly dependent on it?
Yeah, it's a tough question, right? And I think, honestly, I don't think becoming overly dependent on it is going to be the problem that we have in the next 10 years or so. I think what you're going to have is you're going to have people that remain skeptical of it. And the only way that you get past that skepticism is you test and evaluate it
Hmm.
through exercises, through war games, through multi iterations of testing where the gaps are. Like, where did they get it wrong? Why did they get it wrong? Like, how does that look? And that's an iterative process between us and the customer, frankly.
Hmm.
Um, or you get forced into a position of like, hey, Jesus, take the wheel. Like, we're gonna have to do this because we're getting our asses kicked too bad otherwise. Like,
Yeah.
trying to do this antiquated way of doing decisions, we lose a couple battles. We a couple bombers shot down, a couple carriers sunk. Like, the way that we do war is going to be reevaluated holistically. We
Hmm.
should not put ourselves in a position of having to learn like hard lessons
Hmm.
to then like reimagine what's in the realm of the possible. But we also shouldn't just hit I believe on
Yeah.
all the AI that's out there today, because like I said, like there's a lot of AI that I would be wildly skeptical of. If you told me this output was generated by X, I'd be like, man, I don't do it again. Like, let's
Hmm.
do it again. I would be wildly skeptical of it. And so
Hmm.
that healthy dose of skepticism is good. It's warranted, and I
Hmm.
think we encourage it. Like, test
Yeah.
this. Like,
Hmm.
let us test the system, and if it's wrong, tell us
Hmm.
it's wrong. Like, let us work to solve it. Like, this is not we're none of us are building an ivory tower. Like, we're building the thing that we think you need. We think that it needs to be ready for war soon,
Hmm.
and you should have as much time as the end user as you could possibly get to test and evaluate it,
Hmm.
refine it, get it where you want it. And at the end of the day, like, if it's not doing what you need it to do, like, then we'll walk away happy. Like, there's
Yeah,
another way out there. Good, go do
absolutely.
that.
Yeah, man. No, and I mean, one of the things how I think about it, right, is I think about folks that I know that are younger than me, right? And it's like a benign example, but like I mean, you and I'm sure when you were younger, you used to have like the old Rand McNally in the car of you whip it out, you got to figure out where you're going, and you got to find where it is in the back, and then find out, and then and actually like think about and figure out how you're gonna get where you're gonna get, right? And if for instance, all GPS and all like Google Maps and Waze and all of those disappeared, we would still have the ability to figure out where the hell we're going. I
Yeah.
don't know if there are younger folks that have never had to develop that skill, I don't know how long it would take them to do that. And like, I wonder, as we have increased, AI involved in decisions, and this is not just related to not just related to your technology, right? Just in general. I one of the things I worry about is what skills are as a society are going to atrophy and how is that going to affect us? And when you think about in high stakes environments like your tool is built for, how do we make sure that God forbid it goes offline like that it like the entire military apparatus doesn't just fall apart.
Yeah, I mean, well, part of this I think is going to be a natural. And again, I think that skepticism is going to keep the military probably far longer than the rest of society
Hmm.
being super reliant on analog ways of answering questions, right? I mean, to your point, the military still teaches foundationally map reading
Hmm.
and land navigation and like orienteering and all of that because there is a real fear like you have to be able to do this without GPS, right?
Hmm.
Um, and so I think that they're always going to try to insulate themselves from going too far towards technology and just hitting, I believe, too much. I
Hmm.
also would just say, and I think that this is true, if it's a level battle, if it's a level playing field, and so
Hmm.
like if our systems are down, but the adversary systems are down also, I still feel comfortable that we're in a really good spot.
Yeah.
The thing that we should all be concerned about is if there's a disparity in like whose things are turned on and whose things are turned off, because at that
Hmm.
point like things are going to go bad for somebody almost no matter what.
Yep.
And so we want to be in a position that we can level the playing field as fast as possible, and right now we're kind of we're fighting uphill a little bit. Like we need to get our technology more advanced, we need to get our processes more advanced so that we have a level playing field. Once
Hmm.
we achieve that level playing field, like we're going to maintain that as best we can.
Right.
And I think that the system is going to the department is going to ensure that there is redundancy and resiliency across all of that. Now fast forward 10 or 15 years where like it's AI native individuals growing up
Hmm.
inside the force, like I personally suspect that the character of war will evolve at that point enough that like the whole method in which the US approaches warfare is going to be significantly different. I think it's going to be
Hmm.
a much more antiseptic type of environment. It's going to be much more autonomy driven. It's going to be people are always going to be involved because nobody's comfortable with the ROE, the rules of engagement or whatever. Just kind of like, hey, hope for the best. No
Hmm.
one's comfortable with that in our culture, which they shouldn't be. Um, but I think it's going to be
Hmm.
a much more evolved way of war. And I think at that point, some of that AI native environment, like it will evolve to the point of being trustworthy enough that you
Hmm.
can rely upon it. And when it doesn't seem right, like the people are going to be able to adapt pretty quickly to that as well.
Yeah, man. No, I appreciate the clarification, and I tend to agree with you. I think that the next 10 to 15 years are going to be I think the pace of change that we've seen over the last 30 years is going to accelerate. And I think it'll be interesting to see kind of where we end up and kind of where things go. And yeah,
And,
it'll be
it's,
go ahead.
yeah. And I should say, like, it's not all scary, right? I mean, there's,
Mhm.
certainly there's parts of it that are scary, but there's also, if we're going to truly do space exploration, like some of these things are required. If we're
Absolutely.
going to hell, if we're ever going to do like true, underwater, exploration, like to the depths of whatever,
Hmm.
like these things are going to be required. And so I think that there's the pace of change is certainly going to increase, but I think the potential benefits for everybody, for mankind writ large, and for individuals, I mean, hell, for the US GDP, et cetera, like I
Hmm.
think those are going to increase in kind. And I think it's going to open new opportunities that we just never even imagined,
Hmm.
Elon going to Mars and moon
Yeah.
bases and all that shit. Like I think that only happens if we have this apparatus that's in place that allows us to really the stretch our legs, as it were.
I completely agree, man. And then, yeah, and in morally, like in ambiguous or morally complex situations, yeah, how do we make sure that the human stays dominant as opposed to like the algorithm?
I mean, I think that we build it so that there's always an opportunity for humans to interject themselves into the decision cycle. Like there is no Skynet button,
Hmm.
right? I do think that there is. I think that we've heard it enough from end users that this is something that we have to figure out how to accommodate. Is that there's
Hmm.
probably a dial, right? There's a
Hmm.
like, hey, we gotta adjust the dial on our comfort level with
Hmm.
autonomy, and it doesn't go 0 to 100. It probably goes 0 to 70 or whatever. But and so even at 70, you have a person on the loop, kind
Hmm.
of watching. Um, but I think that that's just the reality. I think
Yep.
that part of this gets uncomfortable, but it's if we're being honest with ourselves, it's the uncomfortableness that has always been associated with warfare that we desperately tried to remove over like 20 some odd years of counterterrorism. Looking at everything through a soda straw and like trying to do everything that we could to reduce collateral damage, which was a very honorable, noble thing to do. But it is not the norm throughout America, like throughout warfare or the history
Nope.
of warfare. And so like we should understand, because I know you're a Clausewitz guy, like we
Hmm.
should understand that if warfare is an extension of policy, just in like by other means, then like if policy says win the war, that doesn't mean we're going to like throw all that moral and like ethical stuff out the window. It just means the context has changed and
Hmm.
we have to figure out what does like that war look like, and
Hmm.
we have to accommodate that. and
Yeah.
and so you know
No.
the nation is going to have something that they want to achieve, and we're
Mhm.
here to try to help them do it as best we can.
Yeah, man. And I think it was Moltke. Moltke, I forget if it was the elder or the younger Moltke who said that like the best war is a short war and it has to be brutal. Let's make it as brutal as possible for the and so it's as short as possible. Because like if you manage a short war, like less people will get hurt in the long run, you know?
I mean, I think that that's proven true throughout history, right? I mean,
Mhm.
the difference between 100 years war, the Peloponnesian War, and something that happens like in a matter of days and hours. Like, I mean, I think it speaks volumes about what the difference looks like. Not necessarily something I advocate for. I mean,
Nope.
none of this is something I advocate for. If anything, we consider ourselves to primarily be a deterrence engine. Like the whole thing that we're trying to do is create that environment where you have the option to maximize lethality,
Hmm.
because that's what the nation requires us to do. But the fact that you can maximize lethality better and more efficiently than the adversary is a deterrent factor, so
Hmm.
that you don't have to turn it into compellence where we're getting them back to status quo, right? So like, that is the world in which we want to live, I think.
Yeah, man, I agree with you. I completely agree with you, Clinton. And man, my last question, man, what's next for you guys? What's next for Smack? Where are you going from here?
Man, 2026 is looking awesome right now. We're super stoked about it. We are in the process of aggressively hiring across the engineer staff, across the growth team. We have that traction that all indications are that they want us to expand what we're doing, and so rapidly moving from prototyping into production, getting these things placed at the end users, like in COCs, on ships, on planes, like users like sitting in seats, on fingers on keyboards. It is really exciting to see how this has taken off, and yeah, I mean, it is just it is wickedly good times. We're really excited about like the trajectory that we're on. Um, and we got a couple of really interesting and positive announcements coming out in the next month or so. So we're excited about what's ahead.
Dude, that's fantastic, man. Congratulations on all the success you've had. Congratulations on a fantastic year, man. I really appreciate you coming back on, telling me more about the technology, telling everybody more about the tech. And dude, congrats. That's just fantastic, man. I love what you guys are doing.
It's exciting times. It's exciting times, and like I told you before, like it's a good time to find myself as like the most ignorant person in the room more often than not,
Mhm.
and able to find and learn from all these brilliant men and women around us, like on the tech side that are eager to support national security, and then also to be sitting in with the customers and understanding like, hey, this is something that we actually want. This is something we need.
Mhm.
So it is exciting times, and it is personally gratifying,
Mhm.
and I feel good about how things are going.
Awesome, man. Really appreciate it, Clinton. Everybody, thank you so much for listening to Robots and Red Tape. I hope you're having a great day.